When I was 17 years old, I created a person. I called him Jesse Farlow. Jesse was a rock and roll record reviewer, and he was way better at it than I was. I was a high school senior, and I was writing a music column for my local weekly newspaper. The music really moved me, but my real reason for writing were the free albums I got from record companies. Reading Rolling Stone, I came upon something called a fanzine. And a fanzine was an amateur music publication put out by fans like me. So I decided I've got to get one, got to make one for myself. I called it Bedloe's Island. And as I was about to take it to press for the first time, issue number 1, press being rolling it out on a mimeograph machine that I borrowed from a local stationery store, I had a brainstorm. If I published it under a name different than my own, maybe I would get 2 copies of every record from the record companies. Jesse Farlow was born. Jesse's timing was amazing. Fanzines became a thing. And in no time, Jesse began to develop a reputation. He got more records than I ever would have imagined a person could get, way more than me. And he got concert tickets, and then he started getting invited to press events in New York City and Philadelphia. About 2 years later, Jesse's working on issue number 5 of Bedloe's Island, and he gets a letter in the mail. When he opens it up, he looks at it, and it says, "You are invited to attend the first annual conference of the International Rock Writers of the World in Memphis, Tennessee." And then, in the envelope, he finds a round-trip plane ticket and a voucher for 3 nights at the Holiday Inn in Memphis. Jesse's going to Memphis. And I'm tagging along. When I get to the hotel, I get into the registration line and I look around the lobby, and it's filled with people who look like rock writers. Basically, they look like people trying to look like rock and roll stars. And I'm trying to be like them. And as I scan the audience, or not the audience, the crowd in the registration room, I see 2 of my favorite rock writers. You might know their names, Lester Bangs and Richard Meltzer. And I stand there in line and I think, I can't believe I've been invited to this event, and I'm here with these people who I so look up to and idolize. During the course of that weekend, we were wined, dined, and entertained. My fellow scribes established that they could live up to their reputation for uninhibited living and excessive drinking. I was young, inexperienced, and really innocent. And I began to feel a little bit more like a spectator than a participant. The big event of this conference was a concert by a rock band called Big Star. At the time, they were an up-and-coming band that were really the darlings of rock and roll press, and especially fanzine editors like myself, like Jesse. And they're playing at a club in downtown Memphis. And there's 2 buses that are going to take the assembled writers to the club to see Big Star. On the way there, we're told that there's going to be an open bar, no charge for drinks. We can have whatever we want and as much as we want. The buses haven't even stopped when the writers start getting out of their seats and filling the aisles of the buses, ready to rush off and line up at the bar and collect their free drinks. I didn't know very much about drinking at that point in my life, but I really wanted to be part of what was going on, so I got in line with him. And we all walked up to the bar, and I was sort of watching what was happening and conflating cost with quality. When it was my turn to order a drink, I just looked at the bartender and said, "What's the most expensive drink that you have?" And he said, "It's called a zombie." And I said, "I'll take one." The name should have been a warning. He took what was about the size of a milkshake glass and he just started pouring things into it. And the last thing that went in was this bottle that had like a one-eyed pirate on it, and it said 151 on the label. So I get my drink from him. I walk away from the bar, and I take a sip of it, and it's vile. There is absolutely no way I'm going to be able to drink that concoction. So I look around, and there's an empty table, and I put it down there, and I walk off and stand by myself, and I think, I can't even order a drink and get drunk like the other rock writers here. I go back to the bar, I order something I know, a Michelob, and I walk back, and I'm thinking, you know, Jesse may fit in here, but I'm not so sure that I do. So there's a balcony overlooking the street that the club is on, an outdoor landing kind of balcony. And rather than going to where bands are playing, I walk over on that balcony with my beer, and I'm sort of feeling a little bit sorry for myself, like I don't belong. And I'm standing at the fence, the wired fence that's like keeping you from jumping off the balcony, and sipping my beer and watching the people go by on the sidewalk below. And as I'm doing that, this one guy comes by, and he reaches up and he looks up at me, and he goes, "Hey man, give me a beer." And I said, "Sure." And I took my beer and I poured it over the balcony on top of him. And you know, for a moment I felt I'm uninhibited, wild and crazy, just like these other rock writers. And then two bouncers grabbed me, one on each arm. And they dragged me off the balcony, through the club, out the door, and onto the bus. And they told me I'd been 86th, that I couldn't go back into the club at all, and that I had to wait on the bus until the show was over. No big star for Jesse. I sat on that bus for almost 2 hours, trying my darndest to hold back my tears, and I really couldn't do it. Finally, the doors to the club open up, and 100 exhilarated, happy, drunk rock writers come pouring out of the club onto the bus, and they don't notice that I'm sitting there. And they fill up the seats on the bus, and they start talking excitedly about how great the show was and the various antics that happened inside, people taking their clothes off, all sorts of things. And I sit there in silence. And I never tell anyone that I had been thrown out of the club and that I spent the entire show sitting on the bus. Until tonight. There was never another issue of Bedloe's Island put out. I changed direction. Jesse stayed behind. But I'll never forget the lesson that I learned from him. I might be able to create another person, but I can't be anyone other than myself. 2 years ago, it was the 50th anniversary of that weekend in Memphis. And just on a whim, I Googled Jesse Farlow. And I found an article. It was in blog called Blog to Calm, and it purported to list the top 10 fanzines of what it referred to as the golden age of rock and roll writing. And I looked, and Bedloe's Island was on the list. And there was a reference to Jesse Farlow. And it said, after his mag collapsed, Jesse vanished. Someone out there ought to do us all a favor and find him so that we can all say thank you. I'll never forget the adventures that I had with Jesse Farlow. Thank you, Jesse. And thank you.